Hello, today I just wanted to demonstrate how to call the Gateway API and AWS Lambda functions in AWS environment using the authentication using the Cognito user pool. So there are multiple ways of authenticating your request in AWS on AWS made to Gateway API. So this is one of the solution when we are where we will be using a custom authorizer. So let's get started. So here, as we see, I have created one Lambda function which simply accepts an input request or a string and then returns the uppercase value of the input string. This is just basically the sample code that comes with the AWS toolkit for Visual Studio. So I'm using the same function, just for the demo purpose, but you can have any logic over here. For this demo, I'm just using that I'm able to make the request end to end, and it's actually responding and it's working. So let's get started. First, when you create this function, run it, test it locally, and then you can just go ahead and right click and publish to AWS profile. So here I have given this function name. If I go next, this is the role that I have created for running this particular function. This is all part of security, and out of this particular video, you can learn about this on the other videos. For now, I'll just use one of the role that I already have it and just upload it to my AWS profile. Okay, so now we have our function uploaded. If we go back to the console, go back to Lambda. Here we see this is the function, and it got just uploaded or refreshed 30 seconds ago. So our latest code is there on the deployed on the AWS in my AWS environment. Now the next thing, we can go ahead and create an API on top of this to expose this function. So for that, we can go to API gateway. I already have created a gateway API, but if you want, you can create a new API using this functionality over here. I'll just go ahead and use the one which I created for testing this demo. So I'll just add an additional resource. Basically, I'll be just doing whatever I did for testing it. So I'll just create another resource. I'll call it hello world one. This is what you want to expose your URL function with this particular URL. So once you create it, you can add a method. I'll have a post method. Now once you have this post method, it will ask you to assign a Lambda function to this. So API, you can just search for the API and see whatever Lambda functions are available in your profile and in your region. So I have these two. I will just go ahead and use this one. Create save. It will ask me to give the permission for this API to invoke the Lambda. So here I am done, and at this moment we have linked our gateway API to our Lambda function. So we should be able to test it, but before we go ahead, we need to authorize it. Okay, let's go ahead and test it. If you okay, we don't want to use caps because that's what the expected output here is. So if I click here, okay, so looks like I linked a wrong function in here. Yes, I had some. I was trying and I had some wrong function name over here, so that's the reason why it was failing. Let's go back to Gateway API. Click test it. One more function error. I think I should be using this. I'm not here. Okay, let's go back here and test this guy. We may not be able to test this because this has the authenticator. Okay, so I have figured out the issue over here. I had two particular function class over here, and I was using the other one for testing. So if I go back and that's the reason one Lambda function could have only one one entry point. So that's the reason why this was giving error, and that's why I had commented this out. Once I uncomment this, build and redeploy, I think we should be good to go. So the code is building. Let's push it out. Update. Before we go ahead, I want to just check one more thing. I need to have not this one. Okay, so now we have a correct Lambda function overloaded. Let's test it. So great, our Lambda function works. So let's get rid of this. At this moment, our API also we should be able to invoke the API as well. Sure enough, that works. But at this moment, this particular API is public and without authentication or without any security attached to it. So basically, anyone can call this, and it's not good for your data or not for your application. Anyone can just, if they happen to know what calls and what the parameter your API calls are accepting, they can just pass on malicious details, malicious request, or they can just fetch your data from your system. So basically, we just want to have a security authentication, some kind of security assigned to this particular API. So in order to do that, we just go back to this resource and then click the post method. We see the details of how this particular API is wired up. So in that, we just go to method request. Okay, before we go there, we just have to assign a new authorizer. So it can be any name, but I'm just using cognito authorizer. It should be Lambda. It should be cognito user pool. User pool X. Just note this, we need to use this in order to pass the token into. So basically, we are telling the authorizers that use for this particular header in the request token. Okay, so this is the one that we created just now. So I'll go back to my resource, go to the post method, and just select the custom authorizer. Hello world authorizer. Why it's not showing up the new authorizer? Do we need to publish it? Let's test it. Okay, again, I'm not able to test it. I need to find out how to test this. So I'll just update this video again. Anyways, so let's go back to authorizer. Okay, I'll just go ahead and use the hello world authorizer for now. Once we do this, so for the hello world authorizer, I'm using a different token header token name. So it will be this. So now if we try to test the function, it should no longer allow us to. Okay, so in any case, we go back, deploy our API, deploy stage dev, deploy, and in the dev, there's so we use this method. And use it in the postman request. And we pass the request body as test. It shows unauthorized. Okay, so now we need to, in order to make this request, we need to pass what it is expecting. So in order to do that, what we need to do is we need to create a user in the Cognito with that in the user pool for that application. So I have created a user pool over here. In that user pool, I have created an application which is test client one. This is the client ID that gets generated. Don't worry about that. After this demo, I'll be deleting this client ID and recreating so that I don't compromise the security of my account or my applications. If you go ahead and look at this, here you have the secret key. This whatever token gets generated for this particular client application, the token will be valid for 365 days. This should be very less in case of production applications. Maybe going through few minutes or days depending on the use case of your application, but for our demo purpose we'll leave this as is. If you look at this, here we have enable username password. These are different ways where we can how we can authenticate using this app client. This particular application can authenticate to AWS environment. So I have just disabled the username password based authentication, but if your application needs it, maybe you can use it. And there are multiple ways of doing it. So that is one thing. The other thing I would need is once I create the user, I need to validate that user or make it active by confirming the user status or the account status into AWS environment for this application. So for that, what I will need is I don't need to pass any secret key in order to make that challenge call to the AWS Cognito environment, a Cognito service. So in order to do that, I have just created a dummy client, dummy app client without any secret key, and I'm just allowing everything, each and every mode of authentication flow for that particular client ID. So let's go back to users and group and add a user. Hello world. It should be hello world 1. I don't want anything to add. Temporary password would be admin $123. Phone number is email. I will just use mine for now. Okay. Okay, so as you see, the user is created, but we will not be able to authenticate until we have this particular user account confirmed. So in order to confirm this, we need to run a couple of commands from the CLI. When actually you need to write a workflow for adding a new user for all your clients or all your applications, client applications. But in this case, since we are just doing a demo, I'm doing it from the command line. But in actual application, you should be using the SMS or the email confirmation, and once the user confirms it, basically an email or SMS gets generated that will go to that number or the email, and the user has to just reply with whatnot, or click on the link for confirmation or reply with yes or something in order to get the account confirmed. For now, we'll just do the we will do our code through the command line. So let's go ahead and I'll just grab a notepad or text file. So this is the command cognito initiate auth. This is the user pool. So if you go back, user pools, so this is the user pool ID which I am using over here. I'm passing over here. The client ID is the client ID of my app. So if I go back, this is the client ID. I am using this because this whatever we use, it does not need to have the app client secret. So that's why we are using this particular client ID as of now. Auth flow is admin no SRP auth is just a multiple ways of doing the authentication. So I'm not sure why it's not in here, but anyways. And then auth parameters is username and the password. So username is hello world. I think I had a different username, so let's go ahead and update it. Hello world 1, and my password was admin123. So if I go ahead and run this on the console, AWS gives me some detail on the response. Oops. Just take that, put it into a notepad. So this is the session ID that we need to use. Okay, so we'll go to the next command and use the session key, update the session key into the command. So we just at the end, I'll have this in the notes. I'll just paste it over here. The key again going back to, so this is the same user pool ID. The client ID needs to be the same. Challenge name, new password required. Challenge response. Again, our username is hello world 1. And the password, new password is admin123. So since I had the admin123, I will use another. This is basically the new password at this moment. Use this, go to the prompt, run it, and at this moment it basically allows my user to be authenticated and marked as successfully confirmed, and I can use our application. So for that, I'll just use these values, keep the value here. If you go back and refresh, you will see that this particular result got confirmed. So now in my application, I can go ahead and make this call to this particular function. It still says unauthorized. The reason being, we do not have added the authorizer, the header that our gateway API is expecting. So let's go back to our gateway API. Hello world. Go to our method. Okay, authorizer. Sorry, I'll just pick this thing up. Okay, XAuth token. Okay, I already had this somewhere in here. So let's grab it in our request. Let's put it over here, and for the value, we just had grab this value. Oops. Just grab this value and paste it in our postman. Make a request. It still shows unauthorized. So I think I'm supposed to use the ID token. I used the wrong ID. And sure enough, we are able to make the call. So just to recap, I think I missed about the mentioning about the API, but here we go. For the recap, let's say first of all we create a Lambda function, deploy the Lambda function, make sure all our Lambda function configurations are correct, roles and responsibilities are given properly. Then we go ahead and create a new gateway API. And a new gateway API, and add a resource, add a method, link that to the AWS Lambda function. Once that is done, we add the authorizer. But before we go to the authorizer, we need to add a new user pool. So if I go back to Cognito screen, you go to manage user pool. Under manage user pool, you create a new user pool, give it the name. Once the user pool is created, we take this value, we note the user pool ID. Then we go to app client ID, we add our first client, add a new client, and we just mention our client name like this. We provide basically it will generate a new client ID, and a secret for that client ID. We configure our parameters as required. In order to get our user authenticated, we need to create another client without any secrets. So for that, we created a new test client without a secret. We just note down the client ID over here. We go back to the user group and create a user, provide a username details. We do not want to send any email. We select a temporary password for this user profile, provide a phone number. uh, just to ease our onboarding user onboarding process, we just mark the phone number as verified, and then specify the email address, mark the email as verified. Once that is done, they should not be in the confirmed state. It needs to be confirmed on the first authentication. So in order to do that, we go back to command line and we use these two commands. These two commands, the first one being generating a challenge or generating the token in order to proceed for the authentication. So we update with a proper pool ID with the client ID without a secret. Then we update our username and the temporary password. Once we run this, basically it will return us with a token with a response which will have the session token. We use that session token, update it into the next command. Over here, just note that the double quotes for specifying the whole session token over here. And then the other things to notice are the user pool. Update the user pool ID, update the client ID, password, challenge response. Here we specify our new password, username, whatever we had specified previously. Just use the same username, run this command on the command line, and it will respond us with this particular response, which will have the token ID, refresh token, and access token. The ID token is the one for your communication. The access token is for specific getting access to a different resources. So that is more of authorization, and ID token is more of authentication. And then the refresh token, this token will be used in order to refresh the token once the current token expires. So if you see here, it expires in 3600. So I think that should be that is specified in some seconds or something, so it should be roughly 20 minutes maybe. Let's go ahead and check it. Yep, that is 1 hour. So basically this token expires in 1 hour, and this token will be used by our application in order to refresh and get a new token without doing the whole manual authentication process. Okay, so enough said about that. Once we have this token, we can make a call to our API. So in order to make the call to our API, we go back to Gateway API. We select our resources, we go to the resource method, maybe the stage dev. So we have the invocation URL. We take this URL, put it into, basically that's the URL that we want to use in order to invoke this particular API. Use appropriate method, then go to headers, say provide the header key that we had specified in the authorizer over here. So we specify that key, and in the value we use our token that we just recently got. paste it over here and send it, and in that case we should be able to make invoke the authentication. Now this particular command runs. This command runs while actually registering or confirming the account of the user, but I need to find a different command that will just provide me these tokens, ID token and access tokens, without having a need to go through all this challenge, username, new password required, etc. So I will be looking that and updating this over here soon. For now, this one works and we are able to authenticate our API using our custom authorization in Gateway API. Thank you very much. See you next time.